Guardian Angel, an Angelica Dale mystery by P.K. Armstrong. Chapter 16. She had dressed carefully for the elegant event, long sequin gray dress with a sheer décolletage and arms, which clung to her shape in all the right places, and a slit which stopped mid-thigh, and was, she would discover later, modestly done in the current crowd. Her hair was simple, with soft, loose waves that curled around her ears and at the nape of her neck. Her makeup flawless, with dark, exotic eyes. She knew she looked good, but she was hesitant. She looked at herself in the mirror. It would have to do. Nervous fingers ran up and down the sides of her dress, and she turned and surveyed her profile. It was probably because, once again, she was unsure of Roland. She didn't know why Roland insisted on picking her up. It's not like this was a date. It was work-related, just your standard reconnaissance. Of course, she was dressed for a red carpet event. She had to fit in. How else was she supposed to get information? She grabbed her heels and made her way down the hallway towards the stairs. She had let Roland in earlier, and he was waiting for her in the front room. Deciding she wouldn't risk a broken ankle, she descended the stairs with her strappy heels in her hand. She stopped at the bottom to lean against the railing to slip them on. When she looked up again, Roland was leaning against the doorway that led to the kitchen, an intense look of appreciation in his eyes. It was a few seconds before he spoke. "You look exquisite," he said softly. As they pulled into the hotel valet, Angel suppressed a slight grimace. It seemed like everyone in Filmore and the surrounding areas had dragged out their finest to attend this event. She hated social situations. Roland, watching Angel, suppressed a small smile. She was clearly uncomfortable, although he didn't think it should have anything to do with what she looked like. Earlier, when she descended the stairs in her home, her appearance caused familiar feelings to swell within him. At first, raw attraction, then excitement because he was going to get to spend the evening with her. And now, as they began walking towards the entryway, a little pride, knowing his date was going to turn some heads this evening. They entered the hotel together, but Roland left her just inside the door to leave her wrap at the coat room. He put the ticket in his pocket and turned to walk the few steps to rejoin her, allowing her a first full view of his attire. He looked extremely handsome. His tuxedo was a traditional black, silk collar with peak lapels and silk stripe down the leg. He paired it with a crisp plain white wing-collared shirt, waistcoat with a scrolled design in silver, semi-butterfly bow tie, and, if she would venture a guess, a hole-cut Balmoral shoe. Roland returned to her side and placed her hand on his arm, escorting her towards the large ballroom. They walked between the red velvet ropes and entered a set of double doors. A Grecian-themed room greeted them. White ribbed pillars with scrolls decorating the top and bottom lined the room, each pillar connected by green vines. The chandelier lights were dimmed, and candelabras used for mood lighting created a garden-like scene. The business association did not skimp on food, and the buffet tables were loaded with large bowls of pear with glazed walnuts and strawberry bacon spinach salads, both with feta cheese and antipasta. Creamy chicken mini vol au vent, parma ham tartlets, bruschetta tarts, and smoked turkey canapes filled the platters in between the large ornate salad bowls. The desserts, baklava, cheesecake, and petit fours, were decorated with fresh flowers and nestled on a small table next to the sparkling cider and champagne. She tugged a little on Roland's arm, and he bent down to hear her. "I expected a bit more flash from this crowd," motioning to the decor. Roland smiled and nodded in the general direction of the crowd. "I think they brought the flash with them." Angel began looking at the attire and realized Roland had a point. Bright-colored jackets and waistcoats littered the room, along with dresses that Angel thought indecent, considering some of them may not cover much after the wearers started dancing, or walking for that matter. As they moved further into the room, a DJ began his set, and the group began to move towards the dance floor. Roland, his hand still guiding Angel, allowed them to be swept along with the crowd. Angel, realizing what was happening, froze. Roland was forced to stop with her. The crowd filtered around them. "I'm not sure," Angel began. Roland turned to face her, reached out with an arm, and grabbed her around the waist, pulling her to him. His voice was almost bland. The only sign he was moved by her hesitation was the soft look in his eye. "You don't dance?" I, not usually. I'm not comfortable." Her voice faded. Roland's eyes were fixed on her, and he pulled her in closer, seemingly oblivious to the people around them. He leaned in and whispered, "Will you try with me?" Angel's teeth worried away at her bottom lip, trying to keep it from quivering, but she nodded slightly in capitulation and allowed Roland to lead her to the dance floor. As they reached the dance floor, Roland turned and pulled Angel into his arms. The music was a moderate pace, and they began matching their steps, coming together and moving apart when it suited them. That song currently morphed into a slower song, and before Angel could make her way to the side, Roland pulled her close to his body with one hand, firmly keeping her there. After a few moments, Roland shifted his extended arm and brought Angel's in, tucking it close to his chest. Surprisingly, Angel began relaxing in Roland's arms, as if being held by him was the most natural thing in the world. She stopped dancing and tensed up again. Roland, thinking maybe he pushed her too far by asking her to dance, started to move her slowly until they reached the side of the dance floor. Roland was about to speak, but then noticed the direction of her gaze and followed it to where the deputy mayor was greeting Simon Rain a few feet away. Angel watched as the deputy mayor used both hands to grasp Simon Rain's extended hand. If she remembered what her mother taught her about handshakes, it was often used by the experienced diplomat trying to engender trust, support, or cooperation. Angel glanced over at Roland, who had somehow been pulled away and cornered by the assistant chief's wife's barely covered bosom, to see if he had caught the exchange. Roland gave her a brief nod in understanding. While she watched, Rain and Deputy Mayor Boulder moved off to a corner sheltered by a large tree to speak privately. Either she or Roland needed to get close enough to hear what was being said, especially since, according to the body language, the conversation was beginning to get a little intense. Angel watched as Roland extricated himself from the bosom and gracefully maneuvered himself near a bulky statue that hid him well enough. Roland stood there as if looking for someone who was lost in the crowd. Angel, wanting to give some credence to his pantomime, slowly made her way over to him as if she knew he was looking for her. "I could watch you walk across a room like that all day, especially with that slit," Roland whispered. Angel ducked her head and dropped her eyes, feeling a little embarrassed at Roland's open admiration, and then spoke to cover her shyness. "Did you learn anything of value?" She tried to give him a look that said he was being ridiculous and to focus on the job at hand. Roland didn't fall for it and grinned at her. "Yes. It seems Deputy Mayor Boulder was apologizing to Rain for the way a deal went down. Rain had apparently contributed a large amount to ensure success. Our deputy mayor was promising to return the money." "What deal?" Angel asked. They didn't specify. Angel watched the deputy mayor move on from Simon Rain and work the room. She would like to say he slithered amongst his constituents, but the deputy mayor got where he was because he was adept at hiding his true intent. He knew where to make a promise, some that would be of some benefit to him politically, he would keep. Those promises made to others, however, he had no intention of keeping. Of course, the recipients of those promises had no idea he had no intention of ever following through on their deals. People were drawn to his charismatic personality. Angel was too at one time. It became clear years ago when working at the PD that she needed to make a choice, not just about what kind of cop she was going to be, but what kind of person. The case was her last homicide case, her last case altogether, as a matter of fact. It was 5 years ago. The victim was a young man who worked as an assistant to the executive assistant to the mayor. The suspect was an aide to the mayor. She knew something was amiss. Never had she been called to a crime scene where the deputy mayor, the chief of police, and the district attorney were already in attendance. Their interference muddied the case so badly, the aide walked on a technicality. Roland felt Angel stiffen, bent his head, and looked sharply at her. He gently moved her towards the alcove vacated by Rain and Boulder minutes earlier, and stood facing her with his back to the ballroom. Angel, not realizing she had disappeared into her past, continued thinking of the young man who died. Brandon Doucette left a huge hole in his family and the community. a poli-sci major who volunteered at the Kids Club and Green Earth Foundation and had big plans to fix problems locally. Angel remembered his handsome face and engaging smile from the photo his mother had given her. What a waste of life, doubly so when Hillary Woods, the aide, was let go without charges. She was later implicated in the death of an up-and-coming state representative, but died in a DUI accident before charges could be brought. Little did she know, Angel's musings brought a softened look to her features, and Roland watched as her eyes became sad. He wondered what caused the change in mood. Her lower lip almost trembled with emotion. He wondered what it would be like to capture her lip in a brief kiss, to still the tremor and comfort her somehow. Shaking his head, he thought to himself this was not the time for that kind of gesture, and settled for reaching out to tuck a curl behind her ear. The intimate gesture startled Angel from her thoughts, and she glanced at Roland and then her surroundings, doubt filling her face. He was surprisingly even more touched by her vulnerability, and instead of putting his hand to his side, reached over and used his thumb to brush lightly over her lower lip. He was fascinated by that lower lip. Maybe she didn't move or pull away, so he leaned in closer. Angelica! Mrs. Ella Sinclair unceremoniously interrupted them. Her voice was filled with pleasant surprise. Roland's back was still to the room, and Mrs. Sinclair's expression was full of amusement when she realized exactly who it was that shielded Angel from view. I see you put the tickets you requested to good use, eyeing Roland with a mischievous look. Angel, now fully back in the present, murmured appropriately, "Thank you for getting them over to me." "It was my pleasure." Ella smiled brightly and then turned the smile on Roland. "Christopher." Roland gave what appeared to be, "Is that a slight bow?" Angel stared in shock. "Mrs. Sinclair," Roland responded, and took Ella's hand in his. Shocking both Angel and Mrs. Sinclair, he leaned in and planted a kiss on the grand dame's cheek. "You look very elegant this evening." "Doesn't she, Angel?" Ella recovered quickly. "Why, thank you, Christopher." Angel, who was beginning to recover from her sad memories and their almost kiss, promptly went into shock again at Roland's grand gesture and Ella's use of Roland's first name. Roland's smile turned into a grin when he looked at Angel and realized she was stunned. He gave her a second, but then raised an eyebrow in question. "Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You look stunning, Ella," Angel stuttered. Ella patted Angel's arm to excuse her bad manners. "Thank you, child. You are a beautiful woman. I wish we would see more of you dressed like you are tonight." She paused thoughtfully. "You two show off well together." Before either of them could respond, she spotted the president of the business association. "Oh, Sidney Jones. I must speak with him. You will excuse me, children," and floated towards the other end of the ballroom. They watched her go, and then Angel turned to Roland. "Explain, please," she demanded. "Explain what?" "The change in your relationship with Ella Sinclair. The last time I spoke with her, she kept calling you the detective as if that was what was on your birth certificate. And now she is calling you Christopher?" Roland chuckled. "Are you hungry? I am famished." He reached for Angel's hand, once again placing it on his arm so he could escort her to fill her plate. When their pathway narrowed and she shifted closer to him, he moved his arm around her and placed his hand in the small of her back and gently guided her to the tables laden with food. In a soft tone, so no one could hear, he explained, "After I spoke with her the first time, I realized that she may have alienated a very vital ally in solving this case. We needed unfettered access to the crime scene and potential witnesses, so I gave it a few days and then visited her, providing her with an update. We actually hit it off. Of course, she wouldn't call off her private detective, but I respected her decision." "You asked her to?" Angel interrupted. Roland led Angel to a secluded table for two where they could eat and still speak without the fear of being overheard. After pulling out her chair and seating her, he sat next to her and continued. "I didn't demand anything. I explained that bringing in outside help could impede the investigation." Angel rolled her eyes and sipped her Chardonnay. Okay, I admit it," Roland began reluctantly. "I thought if I put a little pressure on, she would call you off, but it didn't take me long to realize she would not be manipulated." He paused. and neither would you. Angel glanced up at Roland and saw he had the grace to look embarrassed. She smiled at him to let him off the hook. The hour after dinner was spent working the room to find out any additional information and, Roland insisted, a little dancing. A task, the information gathering, not the dancing, that was quickly becoming futile as the evening wound down and the partygoers became more and more boisterous with drink. Roland and Angel decided to make their exit, and Roland went to retrieve her wrap. Angel looked around, made eye contact with Ella, and motioned their intent to leave. Ella nodded, and as Roland joined her, raised an eyebrow at Angel, and actually grinned at her. Angel shook her head at Ella and gave her a look of mock consternation. Roland draped Angel's wrap around her shoulder, and they paused at the front entrance. Shall we forego the valet? I know where the car is, Roland admitted, a bit abashed. I always like to know where my car is, he explained. Angel nodded in understanding. I would like to walk a bit, actually. They made for the sidewalk and began walking towards the big parking lot used by the valet parkers. Roland had a hand on Angel's elbow, but when they reached the sidewalk, moved his hand down her arm and slid his hand into hers. She left it there. So, do you think you have enough background to interview Simon Rain? Oh, I have plenty, Roland said grimly. I'm going to ask about the property acquisitions as well. I think I can bluff enough about the land deal we heard about to make him a little uncomfortable. Possibly. I think he's a slippery one, though. Anyone who does business with Deputy Mayor Boulder has got to be a practiced liar. Her voice was full of disgust. Roland didn't look at her, remembering her face when she watched the deputy mayor and Rain. Do you want to talk about it? He asked quietly and slowed their pace towards the car. Angel was quiet and almost said nothing, but she felt Roland grasp her hand a little tighter, and she sighed and told him the story of a young man named Brandon Doucette who was full of promise, the family that loved him, and her regret of not being able to give them the justice they deserved. Roland did not disturb Angel's thoughts. He only glanced at her now and again as she stared unseeingly out the window. Despite Angel's insistence he'd take her home, he knew he couldn't leave her alone in the state she was in. She wasn't crying hysterically or even angry. She just wasn't present. Angel, noticing the car had stopped, finally focused on her surroundings. This isn't my house, Roland. I know. Roland put the car in park but didn't move. Come in for a drink, he stated simply. I told you I'm fine, Angel responded apathetically. I know you are. Come in for a drink, Roland repeated and moved to get out of the car. Angel watched him walk around the front of the car to her side and open her door. Just for a little bit, he coaxed. He grasped Angel's arm and tugged gently, and she capitulated. Standing on the sidewalk, she looked up at his building, up and down the street, and then back up at his building. I like this, she stated simply. Thank you, Roland said as he led her up the steps into his townhome. The entryway was lit with a small light, just enough to see. They paused in the foyer after entering as Roland turned to lock the door. Touching Angel's arm again, Roland pushed her towards the sitting room and sat her down on the sofa. She shivered slightly after sitting on the cool leather, and Roland reached over, pulling a blanket that was draped over the back and covered her evening dress. He paused and touched her cheek lightly. Angel smiled briefly before he made his way to the kitchen. He got out 2 glasses and placed them on the counter. Pouring the wine, he watched Angel from the kitchen. She had looked beautiful tonight. She still did, even though her hair was a little messy and her face shining from the exertion of dancing. He finished pouring the wine and made his way over to the sofa slowly. After a brief hesitation, he sat down next to her, close, so that their sides were touching. She took the extended glass, settled back against the couch cushions, and took a deep drink. Roland leaned back as well, but maintained contact with his leg and sighed. She relaxed against him and felt the heat emanating from him. Holding his wine glass in his right hand, his left, he draped over Angel's thigh and began rubbing her legs soothingly. Angel sighed. I don't know what's wrong with me, Angel confessed. It's not like you are working a simple case. You've been dealing with a lot of heavy emotional stuff lately. It's always tough when you're dealing with kids, Roland said softly. Angel had not moved away from him, and he took it as a sign she needed comforting. whether she wanted to admit it or not. He put his wine glass on the coffee table, moved his left arm around Angel, and shifted his right hand to rubbing her legs. Angel rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. Just for a minute, she thought to herself. Roland arrived home late after dropping Angel off. She had seemed a little embarrassed. She had drifted off to sleep on his couch in his arms. After relating such an emotional story, she was rightfully exhausted. He had reassured her and left swiftly. He threw his keys on the counter and walked over to the refrigerator to fill his water canteen he took to bed with him each night. He took the stairs to his room, still thinking of Angel and the emotion she went through telling him her story. Her regret got him in the heart. Every investigator had that one case they flippantly called the one that got away. But sometimes that case was a life changer, or in Angel's case, a career changer. As he undressed, he became determined to help her see Violet's case through to the end, successfully, no matter what.